Ryan?
I'm Bob.
Bob?
Yeah,
Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly. So it's just me and you. Like there's no other instructors here. This could get out of hand pretty quickly.
yeah, it could. Although I will keep an eye on the the meeting here and make sure that nobody pops up. Because that's what happened last time. So
Yeah.
um,
So
let's.
here we are. This is April 30th. This is live mentor session number 2. What do you say we do today,
All right, so
Ryan?
I've actually a little bit of housekeeping before we start digging into things.
Okay.
Um, and this first piece here, just because I've said it a couple times very recently, we are not lawyers and we do not give legal advice. So if anything that we say here does seem like legal advice, it is absolutely not. Second item, I want to say I
Hey,
for one, what?
just
Yep.
really quick, where did that come from?
Just I've had a lot of conversations like that, and some of the stuff that we've looked at, and some of the stuff does involve legal. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, it's a me thing more
But
than
the
anything.
truth is, I think you and me are more intelligent than most lawyers.
Um, I'll hold
That's an
on
opinion.
comment on that.
I'm just
They
telling you.
just I
I've been
yeah,
around a lot of lawyers, man, and not generally impressed.
gotcha. Yeah,
All right,
my
what's the
my
second thing?
second one is I for one welcome our AI overlords. So just since this is going to get recorded and it's on the internet, and then when the AI takes over, they know that I'm going to be saying that, so that they're not going to hunt me down. Um, so
We have AI overlords.
not yet, but they might be coming one day. All
All right.
right. So a
What
couple of what's that?
what are the AI overlords going to do to us, do you think?
I don't know yet. Hopefully it's not like the Matrix, or maybe hopefully it is like the Matrix where they just make us think we're living and we're not. I don't know. Honestly, it's interesting when
Uh-oh.
looking
Somebody's going to hire me to be their lawyer. Uh,
at
all right. It's probably not going to work well. I would love to be a
so
lawyer, though. What do I got to do to do that? I got to go back to school again, though, don't
yeah, you
I?
got to go back to to school and pass bar exam, and that's all I know about it really.
Lame.
So, um, second,
Yeah.
this might come up, and I just want to get this out there for everybody. Continue to join the live sessions, even if you haven't re watched the recorded information. Because what you guys are going to be doing is you guys are watching this live session. We're going to be talking about those things that are in the recorded session. You guys are going to go back, watch that recorded session, and it's going to help reinforce that information for you. So just as a note, because we start getting people asking, it's like, hey, I missed a session or two. Should I still keep going? Yes, definitely keep going. Don't stop. Is
Yeah.
ultimately uh, item. All right.
Did you
The
watch the recorded sessions? The ones that I
um,
posted?
I did. I will preface that and say that I did go through them, but it was as I was doing other things. So, like, say for instance, I would watch some of it, but then I was building out some things for some clients and doing some other work that was and then in the background. So which I do have. As I was going through it, I've got a couple of things to ask you about or to comment on from there.
Okay.
So we will hit that. The next item, and this comes up every year as we're getting into this, is note that the book that we are using, this big guy here, is copyrighted material. So if you are sharing this with other people that have not purchased the book, that is technically against the ethics of the CISSP, which is ultimately what we are here to help you guys with. So
And
just
not being a lawyer, it's also against the law.
that's true.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer though.
I'm not either, but just saying that if people are saying, "Hey, we're going to give you guys PDFs of this," just know that you shouldn't be doing that. You should be getting that material on your own. So, or finding a way to get it. So, just a note on that. Let's see. I think I hit that. Okay, so also just the book. So I think we've covered this already. If you guys have the eighth edition, ninth edition of the book, these are still valid sources of material. Just note that the book itself is not going to give you everything that you need. You need to supplement that with other materials, which there's tons of other materials out there. We've seen some already come through in chat. We've seen there's examples that I can give to you guys. We can pull in others that have recently been studying, and we'll be able to help you guys supplement that information. So just a note on that. Those are still valid editions of the book. So some of the information might be a little out of date, but most of it's still good. So
All right. That's a lot of things you said there.
Yeah, just questions that do come up that I just wanted to get out there for everybody. So anyway, so we had
You're so, you're so like responsible.
yeah, unfortunately that's me. But I do. So one of the examples I've got to talk about, or I've looked at, is relating some of the risk response information to gambling, if that helps at all. So that's one of the things as I was going through, I was thinking about when we were looking at it. So we will get to that at some point. So with that, fundamentals was sort of the name of the game for these first two chapters. Is there anything particular that we wanted to hit on as we are coming out of the gate here?
Uh, no, I mean, I think it's all pretty straightforward. You have, I mean, I recorded those sessions, because I'm not good at time management necessarily. And so I recorded those sort of overnight while I was smoking some pulled pork. So I did not listen to them after I had recorded them. But what I was trying to do was, this is what the book says, and this is, how it applies a lot of times, in real life. Information security is risk management. So understanding risk, understanding how to do risk assessments, how to make risk decisions, how to implement those risk decisions. Those are all fundamental to what we do in this industry, right? There's all kinds of ancillary stuff that supports that, right? Vulnerability management, penetration testing, audit, training and awareness, all those things. They're all focused, though, supposed to be all focused on managing risk, right? Where there is no threat, doesn't matter what the vulnerability is, there's no risk. And the same is true the other way. I can have all the threats in the world, but if there's no weakness, there's no vulnerability, then again, I don't really care about that stuff. And that's why it's really important for us to be able to put risk into perspective. I think the worst decisions I've made, not just in my career as an information security leader, but also just in life, are those decisions where I had poor perspective or no perspective. And so when you look at an information security program, you have to account for administrative, physical, and technical controls, right? And that was fundamental in those chapters. We also have to understand the purpose for some of these controls. Right? Some of the controls we put in place are to prevent bad things from happening, right? That would then reduce risk. Where we can't prevent bad things from happening, which that's the name of the game, right? It's not risk elimination. If you set yourself up for that, or if you've communicated that with management that's what we're trying to do, you're setting yourself up for failure.
So
I've had CEOs over the years tell me, we want you to keep us out of the news. Like, I can't keep you out of the news. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't keep you out of the news. What I can do is give you a really good story to tell when you are in the news. And that's the prudent, part of, doing what we do. So you can't prevent all bad things from happening. Those things that you can't prevent, you need to have something in place to detect it. And I took a little bit of exception because we talk about it a lot in the industry, that people are the weakest link. That, and you hear people, behind the scenes, complaining about how stupid people are. Oh, stupid users. They stop clicking the links, whatever. Really, that's a reflection, I think, oftentimes of how well security is being managed in the organization. People are a great tool. If you train them well, if you make, and the way you train people is you train them and make them aware, is you make it relevant to them. Right. And so in some organizations, and sometimes you even have to get personal, right? The same people are creatures of habit. So the same, crappy habits that you have with information security work are probably indicative of the same crappy habits you have at home to protect your family. So turn it on their family. You want to protect your kids? You want to protect your wife, your husband, you want to protect your mother, you want to protect your own finances. A lot of the same, fundamental habits that so that's one way that you can make it, I think, relevant to people, make it personal. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff that I covered. The training went a lot longer than I expected. Maybe I talked too slowly. I'm not sure. Maybe people watched it on like 1.5 speed or 2. But there's a lot to say. There's a lot to unpack in just those first 2 chapters. And they are all fundamental. Everything else in the rest of the book is actually going to build on this. So if there's parts that don't make sense to you or the parts that you take exception to, address those now, because we're just going to keep stacking on more stuff on top of that. So,
I want to comment on you had mentioned not risk elimination, and at an example, it was one of the head guys, I think it was at Druva, that was doing something local here to me. He was a speaker, and he was talking about how organizations come to Druva and say, like, we want to eliminate our risk, or as part of that is risk management. And he's like, okay, well, what sort of assets do you have? And this is my memory, so this isn't verbatim, of course. And they're basically, oh, we've got this, and we've got that. And he's like, okay, burn it all to the ground and bury it in the desert. That's the only way that you have no risk, is only if you don't have those items, or those things, which is, I think people don't really look at it that way, is, you have no risk if you have nothing, or it's all locked up in a room and nobody can access it. There's
right.
always going to be risk.
Right. And so in context, you can eliminate a risk, right? We would call that risk avoidance according to the book and, the verbiage that we typically use. But eliminating risk, when you talk in general terms, yeah, you're right. It's not possible for us to do that. So why even attempt to?
Yeah, I agree. All right. So
Somebody said diligence.
I know, I was just going to point that out.
Sounds like a legal thing to me, maybe.
Due care versus due diligence. This is actually one of the items that when I was studying for the test, I had so much trouble keeping them separate. And even today, due care, there's one that's doing it, is due care. So is doing it. And then due diligence is what? Making sure it's done?
No, it's knowing.
It's knowing. Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to simplify those two, think of due diligence as knowing, due care as doing.
Gotcha.
And you can always, split hairs and, well, what about, for me to know I have to do something, you're splitting hairs. It's knowing about things. That's the due diligence piece. And the doing the things you know about, that's the due care piece.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
So
but that's not legal advice, because I'm not a lawyer. Damn it. I'm not going to be a lawyer either. Ever.
So I know that it's going to be a bit of delay from when people actually see this, but did you by chance go through and do the quiz or the assessment test at the beginning of the book, or has anybody else done that?
No, I didn't. I didn't do it.
Okay, because I did it, and when I looked at I went through, I did it, and I scored it, and I looked at my score on it, and I wasn't happy with it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I looked at the ones that I did get wrong, which are things that they're things that I don't really touch on a normal basis anymore. Say for instance, like when you get into like application security and that sort of thing. So, and I see people saying yes now. So for you guys, if you guys want to put up what you guys scored on that once you guys did it. Because maybe I'll say what I got. But it's one of those things where I've been doing this for some time now, and it's just like, dang man, like I didn't think I was going to do that bad on it. I didn't expect to do great, but that it was bad.
I thought you were an expert.
Totally. I know everything.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's not much on this. They don't give you a lot to go on for this whole thing.
Well, and that'll be the fun part for the final 2, live sessions, is you'll see us struggle, right? We're going to do the questions with you. We're not going to know the answers, and you'll find that we're going to get them wrong. That happens every time. And then you'll see us kind of get defensive about it. It's just kind of the normal human reactions. Like, well, I didn't know you were talking about it that way. I mean, really, if you look at it this, I mean, you always justify, and that's a pro tip too when you do risk assessments of, because in order to do risk assessments, you have to talk to people.
Yeah.
You don't do a I mean, unless the scope of the risk assessment is only technical. If the scope of the risk assessment is also going to include administrative controls, you're going to have to talk to people. You're going to have to ask them questions. And it's funny when you ask people questions and they're like, no, but, do you do this? No, but, and then they always feel like they have to justify why they don't do the things they do. That's human nature.
Yeah. I've done a lot of risk assessments in my time. I think, I don't know, close to 150 or something like that. And it's interesting when you're talking to people and you're going through that discussion of saying like, okay, what are you guys doing for mobile device management is always an interesting one. And they start telling you a bunch of stuff. And it's like, but they're of what they're doing, but it's not like what I'm expecting them to tell me.
Right.
Those sort of key things that we look for in our risk assessment, the encryption, the management of the devices. It's like, oh yeah, well, we just let everybody, bring their own. And then, it's like, okay, well, do you guys require passwords? They're like, I think so. It's like, okay, well, do you, that's kind of important. I'm expecting you to know this. And I'm sorry, I'm starting to get on a bit of a rant on this one. Um, but it's one of those things where people don't really think of mobile devices as an issue. They're coming around to it a little bit more these days, but um, so and I'm seeing a lot of scores in chat on the quiz, which I think most of you guys did better than I did. I did when I went through it, I did it in an Excel spreadsheet, so I didn't actually write in the book, which I originally had a pencil and I was just going to start circling stuff. But I'm like, nah, I'm going to hold off on this. I'm going to do it separate so that way I can come back later and redo it again, and I don't know what my answers were previously, and see if I do better in like say a month from now, as we're going through this and talking about the different aspects of it. So it'll
Yeah.
be interesting to see. I think mine was 25, I think. Is what I got there.
25, dude.
Yeah.
Like most of the people that are putting it in the live chat right now outscored you.
Yeah, I know. And I feel bad. I
That's
will
what,
say that
that's why I didn't do it. I'm like, that's called risk ignorance, which is not defensible.
it is
And we
not,
talked about defensibility. That's an interesting word that comes up a lot in our industry. When you talk about defensibility, and again, not being a lawyer, but just the concept of defensibility, usually it's legal, right? So, and when you look at the perspective of executive management and boards of directors, ultimately what's really, really important to them is not to be found negligent. Because where negligence is liability. And where liability is money. You get sued, right? And it hurts. So they're often looking at it kind of from that perspective. And so, which is important when I'm communicating with executive management or boards of directors, right? To know kind of what's going on in their mind and how they're looking at these things. Because, when you do a risk assessment, especially if it's an organization's first ever risk assessment, right? It's going to be bad. It's probably going to be something, we score things on a scale of 300 to 850, kind of like your credit score. It might be in the 400s, right? And so when you're delivering those types of results to the board of directors, you have to be ready what potential questions might come back from that. Nobody likes to be 400. Nobody likes to be very poor when it comes to information security. So what's the message? Well, if we go from a 400 to a 420, you've made progress. That's defensible. That's what a prudent person would do, in my opinion. Right now, if it's a negligence lawyer thing, it's going to be the court's opinion, right? That ultimately matters, which would be the judge, or if it's a jury, the jury trial kind of thing. But that's the thing about information security is it's always like a work in progress. It's always a maturity thing, right? Nobody would expect you to come out of the gate being awesome at anything, So your first assessment, yeah, you suck. Does that surprise anybody? It shouldn't. And if it does surprise, then maybe I didn't set the stage right. When I started this assessment, like it's probably going to be bad. It's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're going to make things better. Your other option, if you don't do the assessment and it's, swallow that tough pill, is you live in this world of risk ignorance where there are all sorts of risks going on all around you and you have no idea that they're there. You lack all situational awareness. You're the perfect victim. You're definitely, if I was an attacker, you're definitely the person that I want to go after. And that's sadly the thing that we hear a lot in incident response is, I didn't even know we had that system. Where did that system, including the Target breach, 2013. It's funny when you read, or when we went through, the exercise of that investigation, how many messages there were back and forth internally about, does anybody know what this server is? Does anybody know what the server does? Is this normal? That's ignorance. That'll sting you in the ass every time.
So one of the questions came up is any good mnemonics to remember the parts of each types of methods to identify threats? So Stripe, Pasta, Dread.
Right. Yeah. I don't know of any other than just memorizing.
Yeah, that's one like you. I just had to write those down and commit those to memory. I remember having those written down in a notebook where it was STRIDE and then writing out what each one was and then flipping the page over and writing it out again so that I could memorize it. And also on flashcards on those ones too, because I needed to know those ones. Let's see. I wanted to.
There's actually something psychological and physiological about writing things down and that getting into memory. So on things you need to memorize, if you struggle with, memorizing things, write them down. It really does help, implant that in the brain.
For me, I've learned that writing things down is a massive key, and also making charts or that sort of thing. And my goals generally is like write it down, copy it down once or twice, and then flip the page over and try and do it from memory. And then try like, okay, what did I miss? What's the difference? And then do it again. I filled up a lot of notebooks like that through different ways. I've actually got a PCI notebook that I recently created that's just filled with stuff like that. Almost a full, it's like a 70-page notebook, front and back, for doing that because I needed to know those items for the test I was taking.
It's an interesting question. It says, from Warren B, it says, what's the technical term for the methodology difference between a verbal risk assessment and when the assessor is provided access to systems to evaluate configurations? There is no, as far as I know, there is no specific technical term for that methodology. It depends on the purpose of the assessment. Every assessment you do should have a scope and it should have a purpose. The purpose of the assessment is what? Because you're going to measure the performance of the assessment against that purpose, right? So if the purpose is to evaluate configurations and put that in as a risk perspective, because typically when you review configurations, it's usually an audit function. So it's, all right, here's our gold image. Here's our standard for, that was another thing we covered in the first two chapters was the difference between policies, standards, guidelines, procedures. But if the standard says this, we'll audit ourselves against that standard to see if our configurations are in line. That's generally why you look at configurations. Another thing would be, vulnerabilities. So this is a vulnerability assessment, but again, you got to define what that purpose is first so that it's in alignment with what you're actually doing. Because it's really easy to do scope creep on a lot of testing, in penetration testing. It's always been frustrating to me because I have a scope. I have specific, and part of that scope is time generally. And it's like you're this close. You know that if you just go down this rabbit hole over here, that I'm going to own this system, but it's not scope. That's always been frustrating to me. So it's like, okay, noted in the report that maybe we want to expand scope on that next test to go down this rabbit hole. But there is no specific methodology between, and even the verbal assessments, it's just a part of the assessment is verbal. Even in configuration reviews, you should have an interview portion to that. It shouldn't just purely be technical. Talking to people is awesome because, yeah, you get them involved. I like doing assessments and talk through the assessments because I like to hear the questions that people ask. Every assessment, there's an opportunity for consulting. You'll find that in assessments, how often it is you're not even speaking the same language. I'll call something this, and you'll call, you think that that means this. And I mean, a lot of times it's clarifying what we're talking about. That happens all the damn time. It's frustrating.
So a lot of times in assessments, when I'm talking about privileged access, that's one thing that comes up a lot. That's like when you say privileged access, it's like, oh, a domain administrator, right? Well, yeah, but I'm looking for anybody that has privileged access. Like, who do your HR people have, admin access to the HR system? Okay, they're privileged users at that point in time. They should have that same sort of training that your domain admins do in terms of security and what they need to do with those systems. Same for finance, which I'm sorry, because I pick on finance and HR a lot, because every business has those and it's easy. But it's one of those things where we need to, it's a bigger scope. One I work on Department of Labor vendor risk management, and one of the things that are looking for is a system development lifecycle, which often when people are responding to that refer to a software development lifecycle and say, "Oh, we don't develop software," and it's like, cool, like that's cool, but that's not what I'm talking about here. And then having to clarify, the difference between those two things comes up quite a bit.
And we overcomplicate everything in this industry. That's, the very first slide from, the instruction, or I guess the lecture last week was, complexity is the worst enemy of information security. That's always true. We overthink things, we overcomplicate things. The last thing we need is another damn standard or another damn framework in this industry. I mean, the frameworks that we have are all pretty functional depending on how you use them, right? They're just different tools. So whether you're talking ISO or whether you're talking, NIST CSF, or you're talking SP 800-53, whatever, they're all good. It's how you use them. It's how you apply them. It's like hammers, right? I mean, a hammer in the hands of somebody who's skilled in using the hammer is, you can create great things with it, but a hammer in the hands of somebody who's not skilled ends up destroying a wall. And that's a lot of what we do, I think, in information security. And, ego certainly plays a role because we all like to use the acronyms and makes us feel smart, maybe. But complexity is the worst enemy. So when you're working with an organization doing risk assessments or consulting them on how to do security stuff, simplify everything. When they talk cybersecurity and I'm thinking information security, let's just revisit, are we talking the same thing? Because cybersecurity is technical, right? It's technical security. That's what cyber means. Because you're probably using cybersecurity to refer to what I usually call information security. Let's just level set, because that's going to make a hell of a difference on how we're going to do assessments and
So
make a
with that,
difference.
You set me up awesome for a transition here. So in your recording, you said, who is ultimately responsible for
Oh
information
yeah,
security
that's right. I
within an
said I was going to
organization?
answer that now.
You did. I believe I know what the answer is here. So I think if anybody wants to throw that out there in chat, who they think is ultimately responsible for information security in an organization, we can give them a moment to do so. But um, go for it, Evan. Like, what's the answer there?
Yeah. Well, so there was a time when this was really, so there was and I might have mentioned, there was a survey that was put out by the Cybersecurity Hub on LinkedIn, right? And which is mostly security people that follow that, I assume. And the question was, who's ultimately responsible for information security in the organization? And your options were the board of directors, CEO, CISO, and director of IT or something like that. And there were like 32,000 responses to this. And sadly, only 23% of them got it right. So if I'm given those four options, it's the board of directors. So assuming that those all exist, right? I mean, it didn't say that, don't read more into the question, because this will also be a good test taking tip for you. Don't read more into the question than what the question is, right? So if you give me these four options, I'm going to assume that all four of those options are available. It would be the board of directors. 23% of the respondents got that correct. So then it made me think, holy crap, man, have I been doing this wrong? And I see that somebody says everyone has responsibilities. Who's ultimately responsible? Meaning whose ring do you neck? Whose neck do you wring? That kind of responsibility. And so, it started to make me second guess myself, even, after all these years. I'm like, damn it, I've been doing it wrong for 25 years now, 30 years, however many years it was. And so I got, I don't call lawyers friends really. I don't really have any lawyer friends, acquaintances maybe. So I got four of them, maybe it was five. I took them out to lunch, and that's the way you can always get lawyers to join you, is pay for lunch. And I posed the same question to them, read it to them verbatim, just because, like, am I wrong? And all of them unanimously and almost instantly said the board of directors. So then the frustration was, well, if that's true, I have two problems with that. One, why don't we hold them accountable? And two, why does my herd, why do we all get it wrong? And it was a really interesting discussion, after that. And I guess if you really wanted to split hairs, you could say it's the shareholders who are ultimately responsible for information security within an organization, because it's the shareholders who own the business. But the point is, it's not the CISO's job, ultimately, to, information security in an organization. It's ultimately not the CISO's job. The CISO is hired for things. The CISO is delegated certain responsibilities. If you wanted to simplify what a CISO's responsibilities are, because I've had this discussion with lots of CISOs, and that's kind of the role I play today in my own career. Is I'm more coach now than I am player, which is, CISOs are friends. I have CISO friends, and they call me and like blah, blah, blah. And, you talk them off the ledge on certain stuff. But every CISO I've talked to, I usually ask them, explain to me what you do. And not in the complicated, 500-word essay sense, and not in a sense that you're talking to another security person, but like you're talking to my wife, like you're talking to a not normal, but somebody who's not in this industry. Explain to them what you do and keep it as simple as possible. And what you find out is two things. You only do two things. You consult the business to make good information security risk decisions, and you implement those risk decisions. That's what you do. So from that perspective, that makes me not ultimately responsible. I'm responsible for consulting you to make the good information security risk decisions. If you make the poor information security risk decisions, maybe I'm not a good consultant. Maybe I'm not consulting you well. So there's definitely some shared responsibility, but the ultimate responsibility doesn't lie on me as the CISO.
Gotcha.
That's my explanation.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, the interesting, you can't fire shareholders though. That's true. But if the shareholders are ultimately responsible, they can fire the people that because they vote on who's on that board of directors, right? They can vote them off and replace them with others. So, and just like an owner, I mean, I'm the primary, I guess, controlling owner of FRSecure. I can't fire myself. But that also doesn't mean I'm not ultimately responsible for every single thing that happens at FRSecure. Like everything. And I've had discussions before, well, give me an example of something that the board of directors isn't ultimately responsible for. And, we had this discussion and one person said, making sure there's toilet paper in the bathroom. I'm like, they're ultimately responsible for that too. They've just delegated it. And it's the same kind of thing with information security. If you wanted to make me as the CISO ultimately responsible, fundamentally you can't. But even if you wanted to try, then you'd have to give me an open checkbook. I would now be making the risk decisions on behalf of the organization, and I wouldn't need approval. I would be the approver. That's not how it works.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Do you agree? Disagree?
I agree. Yeah. So
yeah,
let's
lawyers are funny.
So
there's interesting. This is great. I love this. I love the discussion. Who tells them they are responsible? If I'm working there, I would. As the CISO, I would tell you that before you hired me. It's just, and it's not out of, it's out of respect. I mean, why would I know? There's two types of lies, right? Our number one core value at FRSecure is we tell the truth. And hopefully we're all people of integrity here in this industry and here in class. There's two types of lies. There's the lies of commission and there's the lies of omission. A lie of commission is something that I tell you that's not true. Those ones are pretty easy to not do, right? I just don't say something that's not true. The other type of lie is the lie of omission. That's something that I should have told you that I didn't tell you. Now, if I'm being paid, which, I do, which is cool, I guess, hundreds of dollars an hour potentially to consult an organization, and I don't tell them that truth. What kind of consultant am I? Now, I get it. It's different when you're somebody who's got, years of experience and you're not desperate for the business kind of thing, as opposed to somebody who's just starting out. But the truth is the truth. You're ultimately responsible for information security. My job is to help you make good decisions. And there's definitely places where there's, I think, just poor corporate governance. There's poor, boards of directors, or they're people, executive management, they're people. There's some people I think that are more open to that message than others. That's what it is.
Gotcha. So, and to answer the question, so the ultimate accountability is the CEO, not the CISO. So I'd say that
CEOs are typically day to day. So the difference between CEO and a board of directors is board is, strategic, long-term governance, that kind of stuff. They delegate the day-to-day responsibilities for running the business to the CEO. So day-to-day ultimate responsibility is the CEO, but even beyond that, it'd be the board.
Yep. All right. Let's see. So
My eyes right now. Look how serious I look.
you look angry. Like you're gonna jump through.
I'm not,
yeah, like
I'm not really angry.
Right.
Check this out, dude.
So where'd you get that?
Some Mexican vendor down the road.
Nice. I used to have a mask from a game called Borderlands, which I would bust out every once in a while. Although I used to have I don't have it right now since I moved. Actually, it's in pieces over here. But a little thing where it was sitting on my monitor and I could slide it over and it was a Batman minifigure. Like it'd be so something like this. Like it would look like it was Batman instead of me sitting there. But I don't have it anymore. But this is different.
Here's another good question. What about smaller companies that do not have a board of directors, head as president or vice president? So if they don't have a board of directors, it's probably a privately held organization. So there's an owner or an ownership group. So that's who it is. Whoever's at the top, like the ultimate top of the organization, that's who it is.
Yep. That is. Let's see. Yep. So let's hit this one. So Several of us are interested.
221 slides, by the way.
Yeah, there was a lot. Although I will
Yeah.
say that come in years past, it seemed where going through the slides in the 2 hour session that we had would be sometimes you're hitting really quick through those.
Mhm.
I will say that this was nice because a little bit more it was paced a little bit better in this one. And granted there was more of it, but it was a little bit more to me a little bit more consumable. Um, so let's see, several of
Is
us are
this is a great question. Sorry, I have to say it.
nope,
How does
go.
that change if you work at a government agency? The fact that you use government agency and responsibility in the same sentence. What do they call it? An oxymoron? I'm kidding. Well, sort of. It's whoever the head of the agency is, again, the ultimate head, the top, like, if you look at an org chart, right, it starts here and then sprinkles out whoever's at that top. If it's a federal government agency, the ultimate responsibility would be the president. Ultimate responsibility would be the president, and then the head of that agency, and so on. How do you hold them accountable? I don't know. Don't get me started.
So several of us are interested in getting remote work in the field. What does the typical remote job look like? What type of skills should we have? What's being demanded? There's a lot in there. Um, and honestly, there's so many different roles and different responsibilities and skills that apply there. Like as long as you don't have to be in person and working on something, I would think that you might be able to qualify for a remote work job. Um, as to what's being demanded, that's a little bit of a different question. Do you have any insight on that one? I don't have an overall view of the industry. I'm fairly not siloed, but
Yeah.
in my own little
It
zone.
it's not there's no standard approach to it. I mean, the and this is going to be opinion. There's no the entire um, job market for information security or cybersecurity is a shit show, to be honest, on both sides, right? I mean, simplify that too, right? Supply and demand, right? So you have a demand. There's the people that are hiring, the employers. You have the supply, which is the job candidates, and there's a disconnect between supply and demand. And there's lots of reasons for it. I think you have a lot of employers on the demand side that don't know what they're hiring for. Uh, they're hiring for lots of letters at the end of the names. Not what they should be hiring for is ultimately what can you do for me. If I'm a buyer, on the supply and demand side, if I'm a buyer, I need to make sure that you can do the things that I need you to do for me. Period. That provide value to the organization, whether you're remote or you're physically located here. That's irrelevant unless the thing that provides value is for you to be physically located here. Like you need to empty the garbage cans, sweep the floors. I mean, those are the physical things. So I think a lot of times people on the demand side are hiring, they're copying job postings from other places and just filling a bunch of words. They don't really understand what they are. On the supply side, I think there's a lot of people who know a lot of things but can't do much. And so that's one of the challenges with hiring people that come out of a lot of the university programs and the college programs is a whole bunch of things. You're really, really smart, but I need you to do things. And you we have a you have unrealistic expectations because you have this degree that you're worth, $100,000 a year out of the gate. But the fact of the matter is you can't do $100,000 worth of value out of the gate. So, I mean, I think we could talk all night about the problems in, I think, the job market. I wish there was an easier answer, like just be able to do these things and you should be able to get a job remotely. But I think if you can, when you're interviewing, with organizations, point out how you can provide value to the organization, why you're the right person to provide the best value at the best cost for them. And, you know, I can do that remotely. I can do information security assessments remotely. I can do penetration testing remotely. I can do almost all the security stuff minus the physical security stuff remotely. I mean, I do all my work remote. I guess if you call it work, do I work? Does this work? Am I working right now?
I'm not working right now. I don't know about you. I don't think you are. I think
Okay, good.
we're hanging out. We're having a good discussion here.
Good discussion. I like
Yep.
good discussions.
Um,
The third slide I had on my deck is the language of business. This is wisdomy things. The language of business is accounting. And it's not me. There's two things that I meant by that third slide. Number one is I don't have, because I think a lot of people in this industry, especially people starting out, they struggle with the three things you really need to get customers, or the three things you really need to get hired, which is trust, credibility, and likability. Right. So trust is sort of, it's something you build. I mean, there's already an inherent level of trust just in the fact that we're not murdering each other while we're walking down the street. But you're honest, trustworthy, that kind of stuff. The credibility thing is tough in our industry because that's usually associated with experience, right? And so a lot of people that lack experience, what do you do on the credibility side of things? And what I usually advise is borrow somebody else's credibility. And what I mean by that is what I did with, when I said that the language of business is accounting, I can be viewed as an authority in stating that because I borrowed the credibility from somebody who has a hell of a lot of it in business, right? Warren Buffett. You can do a lot of those things with information security as well to help you differentiate yourself, or where you lack credibility and experience, borrow it from somebody else as much as you can.
all right. Let's see. Just a couple quick ones here. For those who this is
Stay
their first year,
hydrated.
that too. But for those who are new, we used to do basically 2-hour sessions twice a week, where this year we're doing the recorded sessions. So it's a lot more, less time to jam in all of the information that we're going through. And the format's a little different this year, with me sort of guiding the conversation and it being a little bit more conversation rather than pointing at a bunch of PowerPoint slides and saying, you need to know this. Another one, we are going 14 live sessions this year, I believe is the count, or maybe it's 15. So that's how long we're going. Let's see.
Yeah, the next recording is coming from Chris.
Yep.
So and he's better at time management than I am. So I think he's probably already got it completed. That should be uploaded soon. And then he will be in my seat next week.
Yep.
And I might still join, but I'll try to take a back seat and let the conversation flow.
Next one, the slides. So I don't think this has been asked yet this year. So that's surprising. So the sessions within learn.frsecure.com are going to be available until they're not. And I mean that to say that, for instance, the 2024 sessions are still there. They're still available for you guys if you guys had signed up for the past one. So at this point, we're not planning on taking those down anytime soon. So once we hit the end of the sessions here, they're still going to be available for you guys there. We're not just going to take them away because things end. Let's see. So one of the questions, why are CISOs the ones being held legally responsible in major breaches or issues?
Sorry, what was that?
Why are CISOs the ones being held legally responsible for major breaches or issues?
Well, they're not being held legally responsible per se right now. There's movement there, like the SEC with what's his face from SolarWinds. That was I can't remember the names of all the stuff that happened, but that was an effort, I think, and it still is an ongoing effort to hold them responsible, but fundamentally, I actually want that to get pushed. These discussions haven't been had enough in the legal community nor in the information security community about ultimate responsibility and why we're not holding people accountable. The lawyers that I spoke to in that one launch, they were very transparent with me. They said that the two primary reasons why we don't hold boards of directors accountable is, one, there's a lot of practitioners in the legal community that don't know information security well. So they're afraid to push on that, right? And have the challenge against it. That's number one. And number two, the status quo is making them a lot of money. I mean, that's the truth, right? So the more legal cases, the more legal uncertainty, the more lawsuits, the more all that stuff. I mean, that keeps them employed and makes them a whole bunch of money. So, yeah, I mean, it just logically, the way risk works, and who's ultimately responsible for everything that happens within my house? I can't say it's the plumber. I can't say it's my daughter. It's me, right? As the head of the household. That's just how, liability and responsibility work. So I think you're just going to see more of this uncertainty, more of holding CISOs. There's the legal responsibility, and then there's just firing them. And that's sadly just a shitty truth about the job, And if you continue to do that, you'll just find yourself having more and more difficulty to find CISOs, because who wants to step into that void? Who wants to, watch that wall? Not me. So you'll have a bunch of skilled people that won't. But I think you'll see a rise in vCISO type of work, because vCISO work is, you can still play that role of a CISO, and then when the breach happens, you're covered, legally, usually from your MSA, your services agreement, and it's already sort of implied that I don't work here, so I don't have the ultimate responsibility. I think you'll see more of that. Oh, did I figure out the contest? Somebody wants to go to Mexico. Well, Cyber Gilly, you can just come to Mexico and we can talk, and you don't have to win a contest to come down here. We have a lot of fun. I don't know what I did today. Played piano quite a bit. Worked on some new techniques. Oh, I took the side by side, and me and my wife ventured up to some places we've never been before. She was starting to get a little bit like scared, which was cool. I like that.
Let's see. I wanna hit on a topic that we briefly touched on, was getting into the industry. So this is from my experience when so my background is roughly 15 years in IT, and then moving into security, where after I passed the CISSP, I started throwing out my resume in a bunch of different places for all kinds of different jobs. Where um, and honestly, this was 3.5, 4 years ago. And like when looking at job positions, knowing that, hey, I'm a fresh CISSP, here we go. And my issue was the trying to find something that was in the range that I was looking for, but also something that wasn't, you know, uh, my security industry experience was low, but I had the certification, so I was high on the IT side. But it was just, for everything that I was seeing was a bunch of entry level positions, which they wanted to have a CISSP for, which to me was a marker that whoever put that job description together didn't know what they're talking about, because the CISSP is not an entry level position certificate. Um, is one of the things that I found, and unfortunately, it's just one of those things I had to keep looking. And I was looking for remote at the time, which did limit what I was looking for, but it was hard. I went through a lot of different places. I put um, my applications and resume out there in a bunch of different places, but keep looking is ultimately what I'm what I'm going for, but just keep learning as well. Keep pushing that forward. And also networking is huge. The adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know in that
Mhm.
case, where I can say that one, two, three of the different jobs that I've had in my career have been because of connections I've had. Where whether it's someone that I knew saying, "Hey, you should put in a job application at this place," or quite literally one of the jobs I got because I went to school, IT tech school with somebody, and they actually went to the school and said, "Hey, we want, can you give us this person's information? We want to offer them a job." And the school was like, we can't give you their information, but we can reach out to them on your behalf. And quite literally, it was like, they're like, hey, can you give us a resume? Can you come in for an interview? And that's how I got the job, is because I was in class with somebody. And they just saw what I was doing there in IT and said, hey, this guy would work for our position. I've been super lucky in that sense in some of the jobs I've gotten. But to say that is networking. There's probably ISC groups, there's CSA groups, there's ISACA groups, there's all kinds of different security groups out there that meet in person. You just need to go and look them up and start going to those, start talking to people, start asking questions. And eventually, I've had it at a couple of the ones that I've been to where people will come in there and say, hey, we've got these job openings. The last one was Chipotle, actually. The CISO, I think it was the CISO of Chipotle, was there, and he told everybody in the room, hey, we're looking for people in security positions. Send me your resumes. Um, so it will come up, and it
Mhm.
can. LinkedIn is a good one. A lot of people go there. I don't do LinkedIn, so I'm not super familiar with it. It's one of those things I've just never signed up for it. And at this point, it's kind of like one of those things where, I'm not going to just because I haven't yet. I'm stubborn. But I know that a lot of people,
You
it's
are
it's a
stubborn.
huge resource. I am very stubborn. But at
Gotta
that
get with
point,
the
it was,
times, man. It's
yeah, I'm
2025 now.
get off my lawn. Um,
So there's a bunch
uh,
of questions,
yep,
and let's try
sorry.
to give. No, no, no. That's good stuff, man. I mean, it's good. It's good advice, and we'll continue to give that advice about how to break into this industry. It's a big challenge. For somebody like me, it just kind of happened. So I'm out of that loop for a while. I just go by what I hear and what people tell me and stuff like that. But there's a question here from Data Science. Is about threat modeling. Is it an area that could be big in the future? If so, could you please mention some ideas that could be potential research work? So, could it be big in the future? Yes, I think it will be, because it's prevention, right? It's proactive, and that's ultimately where we want to be, as opposed to this constant reactive piece. So yeah, I think there's a future in it for sure. Um, avoid the as much as you can, avoid the bullshit. I mean, I hate to put it. I mean, I said I wasn't going to swear, but I did, because there's a lot of what do you call that? Like smoke and mirrors, snake oil, in things like that, because they're not generally not well understood by lots of people. And so I think stick to the basics, the fundamentals, in terms of research, potential research work. Um, Depends on what, study the existing methodologies, make sure that you understand them really well, and then think of better ways to find the information to feed those pieces. I don't think we need another methodology necessarily, but I think there's a lot of work we can do to improve, um, threat hunting, you know, some of the stuff within the methodologies. How related to the domains of CISSP does your work experience have to be? Depends on what kind of job you want in this industry. If you want to be an information security leader and consult businesses as like a vCISO or something like that, I think you need to have I think it's across all 8 domains, because need to be able to put risks into perspective. You don't want to advise organizations to make and spend money on risks that may not be their most significant unacceptable risks. Right? What they end up getting then by making those types of decisions is you have a false sense of security. So in that kind of job, In terms of like a penetration tester, well, then you want to be really, heavy on the technical side of things. If you're a social engineer, you want to be really heavy on maybe um, the people part, right? The training, awareness, that side. So it differs. There's so many jobs in this industry. We just suck at hiring, I think. With everything API key based, how is user versus identity changing? In chapter 1, the author explains how user becomes identity. Well, the difference is identity is just a profession of an ID, a user, some identifier. Whether you want to call that identifier, a user, an API key, whatever. The important part in the fundamentals is you profess an identity, whatever you want to call that identity, a user, username, whatever. And then there has to be an authentication of that identity, which is a proving that I am who I said I am, essentially. The level of proof depends on the security of the system, right? If it's just kind of a publicly available system, blah, 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 then maybe a single factor authentication is okay. But if it's if it's either somebody with elevated privileges or it's a very sensitive system, you probably want to make them prove it, a lot more. Then there's the authorization. So once I've professed my identity, proven my identity, now what can I do in the system? That's the authorization. The records of things happening while you're in the system, which supports that non-repudiation thing, would be the accounting pieces, right? The logging, but the entire access control, the paradigm has to be secure for it to be secure. And you'll get a lot more into access control stuff later on.
Yeah. There's a question.
All kinds of good stuff.
There's so in the employee oversight section, chapter 2, how does job rotation differ from mandatory vacation concept? So I get this one. So job rotation is going to be, you're going to be moving people in and out of positions. So you're going to have somebody else come in, do that job, where mandatory vacation is you're forcing someone to be away from that job. So that way you're using something similar where you're having somebody else come in and do that job. Always question if someone's worked for 5 years and never taken a single day of vacation. That's especially if they're in finance. But that's the general difference that I pick up from that, or that I look for. Any thoughts on your side of it?
No, that's exactly it. So mandatory vacations is like you're taking time off, whereas job rotation, it's moving people from department to department, or, seats from one seat to another seat within a department. That's the difference. Yeah. What other questions do we have? These are fun. No.
And
Are they fun? Maybe.
they are. I'm enjoying this. In relation to confidentiality, can you provide difference of seclusion versus isolation in a real world scenario?
Sure. Seclusion is usually related to data. So keeping data within a system, hidden, right, within that system. The isolation is usually system to system. So it'd be like things like network segmentation and isolation. So putting a firewall between two networks would isolate. Microsegmentation would be another example of isolation, as long as you've configured that correctly. But it's isolating the system in a bigger, I guess, context, where seclusion is usually within the system but think data for seclusion and think system for isolation. Will you guys be attending Black Hat? No, I won't be attending Black Hat.
Yeah.
I don't like Black Hat because I remember the old days. Black Hat, it was a lot more, I think, I really recommend Black Hat for people that have never been, to just take it in. It's pretty exciting. It's cool. You meet new people. I just get really frustrated at Black Hat now because it's gotten so salesy. So many vendors and so much just like, what are you doing? Same thing with RSA. That's why, I'm not there. They actually had so many stories. I won't share the stories right now.
So
Bad stories.
um I've been to
DEF CON, I'll
DEF
have a
CON.
team. Sorry, DEF CON, I'll have a team. We'll have a team of what, 28, I think,
Yeah,
last
there's
year.
going to be a big team that goes out there for that,
And
which
I might show up for that.
honestly, I've thought about driving up there for that because I've had a good, the times I've been to DEF CON have been good, and I'm not super far away from there. It's an easy drive for me. But I now for anybody interested, I'll be at the PCI conference this year. I'm planning to go to that. So and also I'm gonna
Riker Murdoch is, here's my idea. I'm trying to get my leadership team to get behind this. We should have a con, and I want to call it Mexicon. There's a, like a Hilton resort, like that way. That's really nice conference center and whatever. And we would do it in a way that it would be like no sales stuff. I mean, sales stuff, no. I mean, you got to be true to the mission, right? So there's so many conferences I go to, you know, I walk away from it and I feel like grimy, like I need to take a shower and I can't get the crap off of me. And I'm actually embarrassed a lot about our industry and what we've become in it's not everybody, but in some respects, right? I mean, the last time I was at RSA was, I don't know, like 3 years ago, maybe. And I'm walking through RSA and there's a guy with a fishing pole with a dollar bill on the end of it, you know, like fishing dollars, you know. And then there's another place, there's a guy doing magic tricks on cybersecurity, whatever. And then there's another one, there's a money booth. And I'm like, this is like it's like a sideshow. I don't know. Some of the breakout sessions are really good, though, I guess. Yeah, we should do Mexicon. That'd be awesome. I had an
can
idea too. I had
I
an
can do
idea too
magic
about,
tricks at Mexicon.
well, yeah, oh yeah. Well, I wanted to do like one of the things, we have a lot of people that know how to like capture the flag, where you have to scuba dive and pick the lock of a treasure chest that's, you know, on the bottom of the ocean at 30 feet, something like that. That would be cool. Stuff like that. I think it'd make it more fun.
That would be fun. I'd be interested to see that. Can we put a camera on them too so that we can see what they're doing?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So we can watch from above. That would be cool. And
Absolutely.
I'm there. And also
Yeah.
I know Hacks and Hops was mentioned in there as well, which I'm gonna try hard to get out there for this one. I'll make a case that I should be there because I would like to go. I haven't been to one yet.
Yeah. I'll be there.
So let's see. So CISSP requirements. So this actually talking about CISSP requirements has come up a couple times. I'm going to grab a link, but when you guys are looking for once you've passed the CISSP, you then need to be endorsed. And part of the endorsement process is basically proving your experience. The way that that process looks is you have to take the experience that you have, 5 years of experience, or there are some waivers in there for about a year's worth of time, and say, this is what I'm doing, and this is the CISSP domain it maps to. Um, for that, you want to basically say like, hey, I'm doing network work, and I work with, say, access control lists, or I work with the different layers of a network, and that is, I forget which domain it is. That's 5.
Somebody's asking if
Uh,
I have hand tats. I have two.
oh,
I have
um,
this is America. This is Mexico. America, Mexico. These are it's my wedding ring. It's my wife's handwriting says I love you. This is my priorities. So number 1, Jesus. Number 2, my marriage. Number 3, my family. Number 4, my friends. And then number 5 is an on-off switch. That's work. So I don't know. Somebody asked a question and I had to brag about it. Sorry.
that's fine. I don't have any. I'm clean.
We need to
Too,
get you some
too,
tats.
I'm afraid of
You'll,
needles, man. I'm
we'll
afraid.
just we'll
I
just
had
knock you
a.
out first. We'll kidnap you,
Oh,
knock you out, and you wake up with a nice tattoo.
that sounds like a horrible idea.
It is. It is hard. It's probably illegal too. I'm not a lawyer. I'm I'm not a lawyer. Certainly not a Mexican lawyer. But yeah, it's probably legal.
Gotcha. Um, let's see, the experience requirements. So basically what they're going to want to see is a resume from you guys showing that information. And then that has to be submitted to them. What ISC Squared does with that information, I can't say. If they check it, if they go back, if they just read it, I really don't know. But just make sure that if when you guys do submit that information, it is true, because if it's not true, that's once again you're breaking the ethics of the CISSP. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well, and I think over the years I've probably endorsed, a few thousand CISSPs, and I think occasionally they'll audit that. So, you just need to be prepared. I mean, the online endorsement process is really pretty simple. You do your part, and then you plug in my CISSP, or excuse me, my ISC squared ID. When you do that, then I get an email saying, hey, go endorse this person. I go review the stuff. I have to put things, I have to attest to the fact that, as far as I know, that's true. And then I put like how long I've known you. So most of you, it's next to nothing probably. And then I submit, and then it's up to them on what they do after that. I know a few times, but I think it's pretty rare. They may choose to audit just to make sure that you actually have what you said you had. But that's not on me as the endorser. That's on you.
yeah, and I quite literally went through an endorsement process today, and that's exactly what it looks like. Which Evan, thank you, because you did my endorsement.
I did.
Yep, you did mine.
Nice.
And for anybody that's going to ask is, so when I got my CISSP after going through the mentorship program, that's one of the things that we will help you guys with. So there is an endorsement channel in Discord at the top. There's a pinned link to go and request an endorsement. It's through the webpage. So when you guys get it, go for it. Or you guys can reach out to me on Discord too, and I'll just get it done. But
Right.
I prefer that you guys go through there. Let's see, and also no on the tattoos. Thank you though. That's I was at a tattoo parlor once with a friend, and they were getting a tattoo like touched up, and like I almost passed out just even
Really?
being in there and hearing the sound. I don't know. No, thank you. All right.
Well, over the years, especially down here, I've had, I think to date, we've had like 200, I don't didn't know the exact number but 200 some odd people have come down here to stay with us, which is awesome because I'm a big believer that if you've been blessed, you should bless other people with it. And so the opportunity, having the opportunity to open my house to people has been a huge, it just adds more to my blessings because you get to meet new people. Um, yeah, it's been awesome. And then I think 30, maybe 35 people have done their first ever scuba dive with me, which has been cool. I think maybe 20 have gone on to get certified, open water, which has been, really cool. So yeah, it's been a lot. But then also, and this reminds me why I was bringing this up, the tattoo thing. Um, I've had like a dozen people get their first tattoos down here, which is kind of cool. I mean, I have a good tattoo
Yes.
artist. He's a good guy.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, if you don't have tattoos, obviously there's nothing wrong with you. I actually was pretty much anti-tattoo until maybe the age of like 30, 35, maybe before I got my first one. And then it was like, so if you've never had a tattoo and you decide to get one, just be careful. They do sort of become addicting.
That's what I hear. And I have a addictive personality in some senses, which actually is perfect transition. So I mentioned earlier relating the risk responses, so risk mitigation, assignment, deterrence, avoidance, acceptance, um, in a way of understanding that. So when I was listening to the session, I'm like, hey, I can relate to this. And actually it's based off a conversation that we recently had. So um, to relating that to in a gambling sense. So if you're out there playing cards, for me, it's playing dice, maybe it's slot machines. So risk mitigation. So you're reducing risk by implementing controls or safeguards to lower its likelihood of impact. So the way that I equate that is, hey, I'm out here, I'm at a table. It's a $10 table maybe, and I'm playing $25 hands, blackjack, let's say. Mitigation. So let's reduce that risk. Hey, I'm not doing well. I'm going to bust that down to $10 rather than 25, for instance. Risk assignment, so shifting the risk to a third party. So to me, once again, at a blackjack table, hey, that dealer's showing what the ace. I don't really play blackjack, but hey, I'm going to take insurance on it, right? So you're shifting that risk a bit on that one. Risk deterrence, discouraging threat actors. I didn't really have a good one for this because there's no real threat actors other than just your gambling, and that's the casino really, is that threat actor to you because they want your money. I guess in that case, it would just be don't even go in the casino. Risk avoidance. So eliminating the risk, once again, just choosing not to do it or saying like, hey, I'm not going to put money down on this bet, or maybe, I don't know, for me on the craps table, it's going to be like, hey, I think a seven's coming up, so I'm going to pull down my bets in that case and avoid that risk of the seven. And then risk acceptance, acknowledging that you're going to be losing something in terms of gambling. So I accept that when I walk up to that table, the odds are against me and I'm going to lose money most likely. So just it's one of those things that I thought about as I was listening to that and I saw that information pop up is a way to relate it. Because for me, when I'm studying, if I have something that I can relate to those items to, it's going to help me memorize that much better and to know those items. So,
Michelle Piazza asks, will we be talking about chapter 1 or 2 at all tonight from the slides, or are we on our own? We have been talking, I think, quite a bit about the slides, but you're also on your own. So the slides are available for download, and the lecture portion was uploaded, I think, Friday early morning or sometime. So really the best process is to review the lecture, review the slides, and then come here with questions. And we try to spice things up a little bit here where it's not always like, it's not work all the time, right? You need to have a personality about you, I think, in this industry. It certainly helps the likability side. So we'll share a lot of personal stories that hopefully it'll resonate with some of you. Like when I mentioned scuba diving, there was a whole bunch of people that are like, scuba, 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 scuba. Awesome. We have something in common. So then when I'm sharing things about my experiences, it reinforces, some of those things. Because I think a lot of people trying to get into this industry, when we share something in common, I think it helps smooth maybe the transition a little bit. Plus, it's dry material. I mean, damn, how long are we going to talk about risk? Risk this, risk that, blah, blah, blah. No, it's true though. Well, in practice, I've always said you have 4 choices with risk when you're confronted with a risk: accept, mitigate, transfer, or avoid. The book is different than what I use all the time, right? Those 4 are there, but then there's 2 more added, which, I never talk about risk deterrence. It could be there, I guess. Risk deterrence for me would kind of fit under the risk mitigation piece, right? Because we're trying to prevent. For me, risk mitigation is, changing the construct of controls or adding controls to, if something bad happened, it would be less bad potentially, or we're reducing likelihood. It's one or both sides of that equation, the likelihood and impact. Risk assignment or transference, I always called that, risk transfer. Risk deterrence, I don't normally use. Risk avoidance, that was one of the 4 choices. You just stop doing whatever it is you were doing. The risk acceptance it is what it is. I'm fine with it. It's okay. I'm going to accept it. The risk rejection, I call that the one that's not an acceptable choice. That's the same essentially as risk ignorance, but the book refers to it as risk rejection. Risk ignorance, if you think about it like logically, risk ignorance or risk rejection is really just inherent risk acceptance. You just happen to be accepting a risk that you don't even know you're accepting. right? That's the default choice. So when you get smacked upside the head because you didn't see the baseball coming, you've just accepted that risk. It's not like it goes away.
So with that, I actually had one of the ones here I pulled out of Discord. So based on the materials in chapter 1 and 2, if I were tasked with evaluating a newly established cybersecurity division in a company, what should be my first step? What should my priorities be?
You're establishing a new information
Cybersecurity
security
division. Well, yeah,
function
information security division.
division. Well, would this be just, I mean, who's your customer? Is the customer of the company or is the customer somebody outside of
So,
the
so
company?
I think that this is from the perspective of this is the person asking the question if they were building that at the company they were working at, or they were maybe the head of that new
Okay.
division.
So the book referred to this as the security function, correct?
I believe it
Okay.
did.
Okay. And the reason why I ask that is because it's important to be clear. I mean, the same thing you'll do in practice is be clear. So the first thing I would do is to establish or define a purpose for this thing. There should be some sort of charter, right? Some sort of, so everybody's on the same page of why this thing exists. That's what I would do first. So let's assume that that's already been done. Well, then if the name of the game, this, let's say that the purpose of this is to establish a risk or information security function organization wide, enterprise wide versus, technical risk only, or, I mean, you have to define what the purpose is because that's going to drive everything for the functions. And so let's say it's, enterprise wide information security, risk management, that's the function. Well, then it's going to depend, but at some point early on in the process, we need to do some sort of an assessment. I need to know what we're working with. I need to, make good recommendations to whoever I'm making recommendations to on how we're going to handle some of these risks. But there's a whole bunch of steps that might have to happen in between that, like communications. Do I need to I probably need to communicate with everybody in the organization that, we're here. This is what we do. If you have questions, this is what's coming. Because I think a lot of times when we think through these things, we go too damn fast, right? We go right to, well, let's just do the risk assessment. Well, hold up. Did we define a purpose for this thing? Did we communicate well this thing? I mean, did we do all these other steps? Because yes, obviously we need to do an information security risk assessment, and that needs to be somewhat early on in the process. But don't just go right to the risk assessment, because if you haven't done the communication of the purpose, you're going to run into all kinds of pushback. Why are we even doing this? Well, if I had the purpose defined, we would know why we're doing this. You know what I mean? That'd be my biggest, I guess, recommendation or suggestion would be to not assume the things have been done. Don't go so damn fast. Be more deliberate. Yeah. Same thing with incident response. I mean, holy crap, man. People on incident response, they just, fast, 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 fast. The truth of the matter is, if you're going too fast to document everything, you're going too fast. That's a fundamental truth in incident response. And assumptions, empty spaces always get filled. What I mean by that is, primarily in communications, empty spaces get filled. They'll either get filled with assumptions or rumors. So, if you're building that information security function, don't assume that people know why it's there, why we're doing it. You can get to the tactical stuff when the time is right. That help?
I think sounds good to me.
Well, because that's caught me in the ass many times. Not many times, a few times, but it's painful.
It
I
is.
just want to get to work. I just want to get to work. Well, hold up,
Yeah, it's when talking to our IR guys on incidents, and that's one of the things that they've always been really good at. is getting that information in. And there have been times where working with clients and they've had something come up and they've been doing things on their own internally. It's when you start going back on it and say, okay, well, what about this or what about that? They're like, well, we're not sure, like, and it does make it hard. So um, I agree that exactly what you said is if you're going too fast to document, you're going too fast. That's when you need to slow down. And honestly, a lot of what we do and what we talk about is documentation, whether it's policies and procedures, inventories, and just having things down on paper or in documents electronically is key to a lot of what we look at. When I'm onboarding new clients, one of the big things that when we first kick off is we do the risk assessment. And then one of the things I do is go into that risk assessment and pull out all of those places where the assessment is looking for inventories being in place and what policies and procedures are in place. And that's when I look at that, it's like, hey guys, this is what we need to start talking about. These are things that we want to start seeing from you guys and start putting together. Let's talk about it. Here's some templates.
Right.
Here's what we're looking for. Let's start it with the critical items first. What's critical to the organization? Let's write that down. Cloud services inventories are huge now with organizations where if you guys work for somewhere and you guys are doing inventories, what cloud services do you guys use? Do you guys know who all is using Box to put their financial files in? Or is that not what they're supposed to be doing and you guys don't know that that's being done? So that happens, unfortunately, where someone from one department says, I'm just going to stick it here because it's easy, and they're not using, say, SharePoint where they should be.
Right. So here's another question. Do you have, wait, where is it? Sample plans. Okay. Is risk acceptance means we will not do anything about it? Essentially, yes. It'll be an acknowledgement that the risk exists and there's no need to implement any additional control. So in layman's terms, it is essentially not doing anything about it. And what differentiates that from risk ignorance or risk rejection is, at least in risk acceptance, you know about the risk. So, taking it back to that due diligence thing, you did the due diligence. You're not doing anything about it, but that's okay as long as you've accepted it. But we really want to document those things, because the thing about information security, being that it's usually based on bad things happening, when the bad thing happens and there's no documentation to support things, it becomes a big finger pointing crap show. I mean, it can get kind of funky. So documentation is good. It helps people remember why we're doing things. Yeah, and we reference that a lot. Another question is, who should be responsible for ERM? So that's enterprise risk management, I assume. The CIO, CISO, or compliance department. We are a medium-sized financial company without a CRO. That's a chief risk officer. So CIO, chief information officer, CISO, chief information security officer, or compliance. Ultimate responsibility, again, lies that top piece. Day-to-day responsibility, it doesn't really matter. It just needs to be defined and documented and empowered. So if it's going to be the CIO, then so be it. Document that it is the CIO, empower them to be responsible for the ERM. But this gets to, we touched a little bit on it in, I think, chapter 2, where we talked about owner, custodian, user. Those are the 3 primary functions when you get to like data classification, which will be coming up in another chapter. The owner is the one who can tell us who's supposed to be, who's supposed to have access to this thing, not have access to this thing, what level of privileges, data access, all that kind of stuff. So then it depends on the organization. In a medium-sized organization, you may not have a CISO. So maybe it should fall under the CIO. If you have a compliance team, then maybe it should fall under the compliance team. And where we oftentimes, I think it's overlooked, but to have an information security committee, staff that committee to make these kinds of discussions and choices helps a lot. So it really depends. There's no one place it has to be. Categorize your assets. Yes. You have to know you have your assets before you categorize them though. So just steps.
So there was one request in here, which might be a good, so just a little something is, or was it asking about any social engineering experience, I think was, or social, oh, shoot, where did it go? Asking if you have any stories, social engineering stories. I've got one. It wasn't me, but I'll let you go first, Evan.
Which one? I have a lot of them, man. Um, I don't know. The one I think people find it's a short story, but I think people find it, interesting was I had a police officers or a police officer help me with dumpster diving. Um, it was for a pharmaceutical company. We were dumpster diving. So whenever we do social engineering engagements, you typically have a letter of engagement, right? Your letter of engagement is really important, and that you have the scope defined, you have roles and responsibilities defined in that letter of engagement, because that's your get out of jail card, right? I've been arrested lots of times, been thrown in jail, not for social engineering ever, because of that, letter of engagement. It's really important. Usually on the letter of engagement too, there's a contact number. So if you have any questions, call this number, and it's, the client, and the client will explain that, yeah, this is authorized and whatever. So we were dumpster diving, a police officer, pulled up. It was, I don't know, nighttime, not late at night, and asked what we were doing here. And we told them that we were doing this engagement, this social engineering engagement. Part of that was, trying to build our pretext, trying to find some sensitive information in this dumpster so that we can build it. And we had, and I have a letter of engagement, but in this case, we had two, and this is actually legal too, by the way, so don't do this. We had two letters of engagement. One was the real one, and then we had a secondary one that was actually, when you called, wasn't calling the client, it was calling one of us back at the office. And so, I had a choice. Like, do I want to end this or not? So I gave him the fake one. He called, and this is why it's illegal, because that was an identity misrepresentation. You could get prosecuted for that criminally. Now the rules are what do they call that? The statute of limitations is out on that. But so then the police officer, called. It's like blah 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 blah, and I'm in the back of the police car at this time, and then he comes back and says, "All right, do you need any help?" And because I didn't know the conversation that took place. And then he just started helping me, take things out of the dumpster and go through them, looking for more information. He spent like, I don't know, probably 45 minutes with me on that one. I got busted. The only time I really got busted was in Las Vegas. That's another story. I mean, there's lots of stories. There was the one trying to get into a data center, and that was the objective, was to get into the data center. And so our pretext that we came up with was that we were going to pose as exterminators. And so we had to get the outfits together. I had a partner with me, and what we were going to do, and this is what we did, is we said that there was a report that there's an infestation of a spider, and we had one of those plastic, clear, specimen cases. And so, and this was a multi-tenant building, right? And so we could use the fact that the owner of the property called. That's why you didn't know about it as the renter of the property. And so we went to the area that we're supposed to, and you show them this scary looking spider, and that automatically like evokes emotions. That's one of the greatest things about social engineering, is trying to take advantage of emotions versus logic. So the secretary was like, "Oh yeah, okay." And I said, "And we've gotten a report that's in your server room, because spiders are cold-blooded animals and they like heat, right? And the whatever." So, long story short, she got the director of IT or somebody, and we explained to him what was going on. And then when we were so he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll escort you into the data center. And then when we opened this, one of the tiles in the data center, it's like, oh shit, okay, I think we found it. And then the guy was like, what? You're like, yeah, you might want to leave, so we can get our hands around this. And so he left, and then we're alone in the data center. But there's more to that story that I wanted to speed it up a little bit. There's a lot of them, a lot of stories.
I'll hit a real quick one that I heard. Once again, this is third party. I was not involved in this, or this was just relayed to me by a keynote. Basically, the person, professional social engineer, they were hired to test some organization where they had this multi-million-dollar security system that they had recently implemented. And their job was to get inside, basically, get past the physical security. So they went, they checked it out, looked to see what was there, what sort of security system it was. They had some information. Also, as a note, always make sure you have that information saying that you're doing a pen test. Make sure you have that note. If you don't have one, you are not doing that. You are not doing a physical pen test if you don't have that. But
There's lots of stories of, or organizations that have hired social engineering pen testers, which would be like a physical pen test essentially, and they've been busted and arrested and
yeah,
charged criminally because you didn't have that letter of engagement.
Yeah. But basically, so in order to get through the social engineering engagement, what they did, they looked at the system and said, we can do this. All they did was at night, they went and put a note on the door, just a piece of paper written in pen, do not close this door. They posted that right next to the door that they wanted to get in through. The next day, someone came in, they opened the door, saw the note, and they popped it open. They walked right in, past all of the security. That's all they needed to get past that multi-million-dollar security system was a pen and a paper. Or that was it.
Yeah.
Which, yes, like your story, there was more to it. Like I said, I'm the third party relaying this information. I was not the one who did it. So I know I've probably missed a lot of the important details, but that was the moral of the story. You play on people's emotions. You just do something simple where people are predisposed to, hey, oh, you're coming through the door. Let me hold that for you. Using a cake box is amazing for just getting into a building.
Yeah, it's very, very true. The sorry, I had to cough. And just like the authority piece is a big one too. We've done this just for shits and giggles. There's all kinds of industrial supply stores where you can go get, the vest, the hat, and a sign, and just go stand out in the middle of the road and tell people the road is closed and point them to take a left, and they'll all take a left. And nobody will really question it. Even law enforcement. Now, I haven't done, usually I stop. I mean, I've never done it with law enforcement, but I've done it with people. But I know friends who have even sent law enforcement to the left, so there's a lot of things that people, and now the best way to beat a social engineer, and this is the time that I got busted, is to take them out of their pretext. So keep asking questions. Eventually, there's a question that they didn't account for in their pretext. So a pretext is just essentially the story of who you're going to pretend to be, the role that you're going to play in this particular scenario. And you do a lot of work, to build that pretext. You do a lot of OSINT, that's open source intelligence gathering. You do, in some cases, dumpster diving. You want to find out as much as you possibly can about the target so that you can figure out what's the best pretext. And then you sit down with your team and you figure out your pretext. But yeah, the one time that I was actually doing training in Las Vegas with Chris Hadnaghi. So he's, if you look up Chris Hadnaghi, he's fantastic social engineer, written multiple books about it. But he was doing a training out of Black Hat, and this is probably like 10 years ago. And I attended his training, and what we would do is we would learn technique during the day, and then at night we would go out in Vegas and practice what we learned. And so there were a lot of social engineering attacks that we had performed And most of the people at Black Hat were scared of this class because there was a reputation that we were out there doing these things. And it was a really simple attack that I got, in trouble, not really in trouble for, but it took me out of my pretext. Our job was to get like these 5 pieces of information from random people on the street. And Chris Hadnegi and 2 of the instructors would text you the target. So you didn't know who the target was going to be as you're in this like mall area. And they texted me like the lady in the hijab, HIJAB. At the time I had no idea what that was. So I'm like, the what? And this they text me, the one sitting, right behind you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I sat down with her and I was, explaining, I said I'm a researcher, at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I'm doing some sociology research on the people that visit the Las Vegas area. And so, do you mind if I ask you just a few questions about, your visit here? Or, are you visiting here? Yeah, I'm visiting here. Okay. And I started asking her, a bunch of questions. She gave me all the information I needed. So I had successfully passed that test. And as I got up, I noticed out of the corner of my eye, you can notice patterns around you if you really know situational awareness, you notice. And there was somebody approaching me from the right that was kind of moving faster than normal and more direct towards me and normal. So I turned over and he's like, excuse me. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, what were you just asking her? And I said, I was asking her, these things. And he's like, why? And I go, well, because I'm a, student at the University of Nevada. So I gave him the whole spiel. And he said, who's your instructor? Or who's your professor? As part of my pretext, in the time that I had to build it, I didn't even think of that. So I was like, I just froze. I mean, I could have, in hindsight, you could have come up with anything. I could have said, oh, Professor Johnson, sociology, whatever. I couldn't think of anything. So I froze. And that's how you do it. That's how you take people out of their take them out of their pretext. I hadn't had enough time to think of a good pretext beyond that. And so I had to come clean. I'm like, all right, look, there's this conference over here, Black Hat, we're a bunch of information security professional people, blah, blah, blah. I'm taking this class on social engineering and this is what I'm trying to do. And this is how I'm trying to apply it. It's nothing illegal. And he's like, oh, okay. I go, I'm curious, like, what tipped you off? He goes, well, you were talking to my wife. I'm like, oh shit. All right. And he goes, and I'm a Canadian Mountie from Ottawa or something like that. I was like, oh, all right. So yeah, he was very suspicious, but I didn't get arrested or anything. It was just, but that's the only time I was actually gave up on an attack. I'm very competitive. So all the social engineering, projects I've done in the past, we've been successful, except for that one. Simple one.
Gotcha. So a question on the topic of physical security controls. Is it nonsensical to require IT employees to sign the data center sign-in sheet?
Is it nonsensical?
Nonsensical. I'd say it's required. Honestly, you want to know when they're going in, when they're going out. If you don't have a sign-in, then some sort of auditable control for who's accessing that data center. Whether can you go back on cameras? Do they have to badge in and out, for instance? So some sort of control needs to be there for that.
Right. But even a sign in, sign out piece, there's you've only got one part, right? You only got the identity. Still no authentication there. There's,
That's
so
true.
it's limited in its effectiveness. I think you need to just recognize and realize what that control is and what it would do. Camera surveillance, in my opinion, would be high quality. Camera surveillance coupled with badge in, badge out would be, I think preferred over that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, sign in maybe guests who don't have those things, but part of the process or procedure would be to validate that the guest is who they said they are. So there still needs to be some authentication.
I've had many of assessments where I've just been let into a building and nobody told people that I was there and I could just walk around and do whatever I wanted. Granted, I didn't take advantage of that, but people were
Right.
surprised when I showed up in a conference room and like, when did you get here? I'm like, been here 5 minutes, man. No one told you? They just let me in.
So
So
the question, authenticate via security guard. Yeah. If the security guard asks for authentication, or they know the person personally, that type of authentication, but just the security guard being there and observing isn't authentication. Yeah. Yeah, good questions. I like these questions. A sign-in logbook could be used to gain access. I mean, it's an audit. I mean, the sign-in log is not going to be a preventative control. It might be somewhat deterrent control. It's a corrective audit type control, right? So when something bad happens or whatever, who was in there at the time, you can go back and review those things, but it's not going to beyond that. But then you also have to take it with a grain of salt. That could easily be bypassed if there's no authentication associated with it. We don't want controls. There's no sense in putting a control in place if it's so easily bypassed because it just renders the control ineffective. For surezies. Now, the one thing that will definitely be on the exam, at least as far as I know, will be this quantitative risk analysis equation, where you've got asset value and you've got exposure factor. That's essentially how much the asset value is exposed in a specific incident scenario. Those two multiplied. So usually that's represented as a function of percentage of the asset value. So those two things multiplied together in simplistic terms bring up the single loss expectancy, right? And then you calculate an annual rate of occurrence. How often would we expect this bad thing to happen? That gives you an annual rate of occurrence. And so the single loss expectancy multiplied by the annual rate of occurrence will give you an annualized loss expectancy. In practice, in my 30 some odd years in this industry, I've done this maybe 3 times. Actually gone through this work, but it doesn't mean it's not important. Doesn't mean it's not something we should understand. But this is one of those things where I think academically you should know it. Practically, there are other ways that we go about, figuring out if there's a cost effectiveness to the controls that we're recommending. But you'll need to know that equation. You'll be given a scenario for sure.
So for reference, this is the chapter 2 slides, right around 167 or so, slide 167.
Yeah.
In that range. So for reference, so you guys can go back and look at that.
I'm back. Another drink. This one is what do you call that? Shoot.
So like one of the powder type
These
things you put in
things.
there?
Yeah. Celsius. These are pretty cool, man. There's like 200 milligrams of caffeine in this. I also have these. These are caffeine capsules. I don't recommend these necessarily for your health, but I have them. And then a whole bunch of protein bars. Got to stay fit.
See, I just go for the water out of my FRSecure branded tumbler here.
There you go, representing. Love it. All right, what other questions do we have? Should we move to some? I don't know how many people are using ChatGPT, but or some other similar AI, but it can be a fairly useful training tool, because rather than me spending the time to try to figure out, hey, give me 10 practice questions or 20 for this, portion of training of the lecture, all I did was uploaded the slide deck and said, give me 10 practice questions along with the answers and explanations from this content. So simple prompt. If people don't know prompts, prompt is just what you're asking for. And then you get 10 practice questions. And then if I want 10 more, I just ask for 10 more. So you can switch things up and make things a little bit, switch the variety a little bit. You'll have, certainly the questions in the book itself that are, I think, useful. But yeah, that's what I did. So I have 10 practice questions if we want to go through them.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So number one, and I'm not going to show you because my prompt, I didn't separate it out. So you're going to see the answer and all that stuff. But you have to listen now. You listening?
I'm listening.
Are you?
Indeed.
Are you sure?
You're starting to make me question myself if I'm not.
No, you are. No, yeah, I'll validate. You're listening. All right. So which of the following best defines information security? A, protecting against online attacks using firewalls. B, risk management across administrative, physical, and technical controls. C, ensuring the internet stays secure. Or D, preventing all forms of cyber threats.
I think it was B was the one that I would go for on that one.
B, so information security of those four choices is best defined as risk management across administrative, physical, and technical controls. That's correct. Congratulations.
All right, I got one.
You got one. Yeah. And that's just so the explanation for that is what it actually is. It just is that, right? That's the thing about definitions. Like there's usually not much of an explanation around a definition because it just is what it is, right? I don't know how you give more explanation. All right. So man, it took like some of the things right out here. So what is the key distinction between cybersecurity and information security?
Technical versus like administrative, or cybersecurity is technical. Would be my.
But how do you know? Because I didn't even give you the answers yet.
Oh, because I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry.
You are jumping ahead. Exactly. That's a testing no-no.
Right yeah.
There.
So testing tip number, whatever it is, don't jump ahead in your questions and do what I just did. No. Because you also read the question twice. That's helped me many times in testing. And also watch out for nots. They love to say which is not the thing as well.
Oh yeah. Does this one say that? No. So yeah, good point. Because you I think said last week that you can't go back.
You can't go back.
Right. So yeah, make sure you read that question really well and read each one of the answers well. And I think it still holds pretty much true in a lot of the common multiple choice. You'll have 4 options, and typically 2 of them you can eliminate right away if you know really anything about the content. And then it's a question of which one of the 2 that are left are the best answer, because you could probably justify, if you ever thought enough, both of them. So, all right. So what's the key distinction between cybersecurity and information security? A, cybersecurity includes legal aspects. Information security does not. B, information security focuses on confidentiality only. If you remember from the slide, privacy does that, right? Privacy is only around confidentiality. So that was B. C, cybersecurity is focused on digital environments, while information security includes physical and administrative aspects. D, they are the same term used interchangeably.
No.
So seems like C.
Yeah, I'd have to go C on that one as well.
So that's the thing. Like next time, maybe next week, I'll show these. Now we'll prepare them on slides so you can show them, so you don't have to remember like, the hell one did he just say? All right. But it also makes you pay attention.
It does.
I still need to figure out a damn contest. I might need your help on that, Brian.
Yeah. I'll put my head into it and see what I can come up with.
I'm too ADHD, so I forgot. I actually forgot these questions too until I was like sitting here. I was actually typing this while we were doing the whatever the hell we were doing, whatever this thing we're doing right now.
The thing, yeah.
I was like, oh crap, I didn't create questions. So I just opened up ChatGPT. I'm like, give me some damn questions. And it does. So that's the cool thing too. But like, if you do use ChatGPT and you want to use it, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I think AI is pretty well built for, is giving me ideas, creating things from things, that kind of stuff. It will also, you can modify your prompt. Like, I want more of an explanation, or I want harder questions, or I want questions that are, two of them could be right questions, but one are right answers, but one of the answers is more right. I mean? So you can modify. That's one of the things I actually like about now that AI has become more mainstream, is I can use it as a tool to modify it according to my learning behaviors.
So I have to ask this now. I haven't played with AI in this sense. Do you
Oh,
think that or getting it doing this in an AI would be better or on the same level as, say, using like FRSecure or quantum exams, boson? Because one of the things I do remember when I was going through my studies was that those questions were really good at giving me at least some preparedness for the exam questions, which I'm not going to lie, when you guys get into like the very first question that I looked at when I took my exam, I read it and I'm like, holy cow, this is like nothing I've practiced for. It was
mm-hmm.
different. And I could have swore I failed within the first five questions. But
Yeah.
do you think that the information or the questions that the AI is giving you is going to be on the sort of same level that you would need to practice with,
No.
or is this, so this would be in addition to, say, hey, you do need to still get practice quest exams, which if you have the book, there are a bunch of practice questions and such that go along with it, but there's other
Right.
resources as well.
Yeah.
And
Well, a lot of this stuff, I mean, mastery comes from repetition,
Mhm.
right? I think anything that you, like, the best way to master security stuff is to teach it. I mean, that's why I've gotten so much value over the years in doing this stuff, because it's the repetition, it's the justification. It's why I think the thing, being able to defend these things. So your test prep, like CSecure or Secure and others, they're one tool. I think AI is another potential tool that you can use. Slide decks, flashcards. So it's just another tool. I think the thing I like about AI as opposed to the others is in terms of test preparation, is it allows me to customize it. Like, challenge me more, make it
Mhm.
harder, or switch. And what I mean? So I can make it fit me. But I think the advantage to using like Secure and other, test engines is it more simulates the real exam. So I would use them both, honestly.
So I want to touch something on, well, I've got it in my head. So when you guys are going to take the exam, make sure that you guys can sit and do practice tests and go through questions for like an hour, hour and a half at a time. That was one of the sort of things that I had to condition myself for, was that I needed to be able to sit in a single spot, sit in front of a computer screen, think through questions without listening to music, without looking at my phone, without having, just something distracting me. And that was hard for me because it'd been so long since I've done anything like that. So you need to practice that, where you are just almost in a bubble where you're not being distracted by anything and being able to
Right.
concentrate just on that. It's a different type of stamina to do so for that test.
Right. Good question by Steve Ballard. How confident are you in the GPTs out there can give you 100% correct answers compared to the tests like CSecure? I don't believe that CSecure is 100% correct in the answers either. So that's the cool thing. And it also is a lesson, I think, in learning to use existing AIs, is I don't I don't take any of it at face value. I use my own discernment, my own mastery of whatever it is I'm talking to it about, and then I validate. I go out and look for empirical evidence to support whatever it is that it said. So that whole process, though, also reinforces, I think, those key things, for me. Um, but the thing, if you're going to use ChatGPT the way I just explained that I did, which was to upload the slides into it and then ask it to do something with it, the answers to the questions then will probably be very closely related to what was in the slides. So then you have to ask, well, are the things in the slides correct or not? But still, that whole process, I think, is a great mental exercise to go through logic, continually question everything, right? The next question, which of the following is a physical control? Access control list, A. Antivirus software, B. Security guard at the entrance, C. Role-based access control, D. I actually like that question a little bit because, I mean, role-based, you could make a physical role-based access control. However, that's not the best answer. The best answer here would be security guard at the entrance. But then just reading through that, I'm like, okay, why would it be the security guard at the entrance? Well, essentially physical controls are typically things that you can touch, right? And that's how we explain it. But then I would ask myself even more, like, a security guard at the entrance, what type of control would that be beyond the classification of a physical control? It's preventative or preventive, right? Because a guard could prevent an intrusion. It's also deterrent. It's also detective. It's also correct. That's a pretty damn good control, essentially. Cost benefit, though, I suppose.
Yep.
Number 4, what does the govern function? So if you remember, there are functions in the NIST CSF 2. The newest one, and it wasn't in 1.2. The govern function is new in the version 2. So the question is, what does the govern function in NIST? Do you remember what the other functions are?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Govern, identify, detect, respond, correct. I don't know. I think I've got most of them. Identify. Anyway, but what does it emphasize? A, recovery planning. B, technical control implementation. C, establishing risk tolerance policies and accountability. D, monitoring data exfiltration.
C.
Right. Yep. Establishing risk tolerance policies and accountability. Whenever I think govern, I always think of recover. There you go. Whenever I think govern, I think rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to play games. So I think that's what helps me succeed in a lot of things, because I'm really competitive. And so, like, I think of govern as rules for the game. What kind of game are we playing? And that's, there's no two games that are exactly this. The thing about information security, and you'll find this in practice, is it's never one size fits all. The rules at one company aren't the same rules at another company, nor should they be. The only way we could ever have the same exact and have them be like useful is if we had the same people, same physical locations, same technologies throughout. That's the only way we would ever expect the same result. But anyway, there's your logic thing. So govern is, establishing risk tolerance policies and accountability. And there's a reason why they put govern there too. And I was really happy to see that in version 2, because it wasn't there before. So it was like, okay, you've got all this stuff. What are the rules? You totally missed out on, like, probably the most important thing. Why are we here? Why are you paying me? So yeah, that govern function is really, really super important. I'll just do one more and then we can wrap this thing up, I suppose.
Okay.
Which best describes inherent risk? Inherent risk. So in my hair. Wait, I don't think I'm doing that right. Is that right? No, it's not right. Okay. Well, anyway, which best defines inherent risk in information security? Risk after controls are applied, for A. Risk due to outdated systems, B. C, risk before any controls are applied, or D, residual risk from known attacks.
So I'm going to go with, I think it was C on this one. Can you read C again?
Sure. Risk before any controls are applied.
That's, if I was sitting taking a test, that's what I would select, C, which
that's the correct answer. Well done, friend.
Awesome.
So risk after controls implied, that's residual risk.
Yep.
Right. Inherent risk and residual risk are sort of opposites of each other, sort of. Risk due to outdated systems, which I said was B, that's legacy risk. Risk before controls are applied, that is inherent risk. Residual risk from known attacks, I don't even know what the hell that is. And the way we typically play these two, so when you talk about classification of things, classification of systems, vendors, whatever, usually you do that based on inherent risk. Inherent risk is just the risk in being, right? Like, it's due to the nature of whatever it is that you're classifying or you're associating an inherent risk to. So like, I'll use it for vendor risk management, for instance. So I have some vendors, or third parties who, they essentially just deliver food supply stuff, right? Sodas, things to stock the refrigerators or whatever. And then I have another third party who is an outsourced IT provider who has administrative access to the domain or multiple domains, whatever. So the inherent risk of the person who just delivers sodas and things like that is really very low, because without any controls in place, there's really not much that can happen, right? From an information security perspective. Whereas the other one, the inherent risk is very high, because there's a lot that they can do if we don't consider controls in place. So you use that to classify those third parties, right? This third party would be classified as low. I don't really care too much. This other one is going to be high, if not critical. Then that would lead to, then, based on the classification of inherent risk, what type of risk assessment I'm going to do. It doesn't make sense for me to do a long, drawn-out risk assessment of the Coca-Cola delivery driver. Makes a hell of a lot of sense for me to do a long, drawn-out risk assessment and a whole bunch of due diligence on the IT service provider. But you see how these two play off of each other? An inherent risk will lead to the type of assessment you do for residual risk, to try to measure what a residual risk is. Then once you do that risk assessment with the third party, you find out, hey, there's some controls in place, lack of controls in place, where those are just risks that we're not willing to accept. Then you go into that, phase. So I like defining the difference between inherent and residual risk, because that's really fundamental.
That's a very good explanation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I use inherent risk to classify. I use residual risk to actually assess. All right, we spent the whole 2 hours. We talked about scuba diving. We talked about Mexicon, which we got to get that going, I guess. Got the Timberwolves game starting here in a little bit against the Lakers. Go Wolves! If you're from LA, sorry to hear that.
Cool. And I'm hungry because I haven't eaten anything.
All right.
So I'm going to go.
Good talk. So next week we've got, so for the people watching still, look for the next lesson coming from Christoph, which will be nice because you'll get a different take on things. And if you were paying attention to that first session, there were already some things that we disagreed with, right? If you picked up on that one, I believe that risk is always based on a negative outcome. He said there's positive risk. Interesting. But the good thing for you as a student or somebody in this is you get different perspectives, which will be really important to hear that from Christoph. And then he'll be here next week.
Cool. Which I will, I'll tag everybody in Discord when that gets posted, when I get confirmation of it, so that you guys can look there for the notification. But yeah, thank you guys very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for hanging out, Evan. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys next time.
Right on. Stay hydrated. Stream has now been ended.